nobody questioned it. Not because it was perfect, not because it had never failed, but because it felt official. Every month, football fans around the world checked the same list. Journalists referenced it, broadcasters displayed it, managers talked about it, and supporters used it to settle arguments. Who was the best team in the world? The answer seemed simple. Just look at the FIFA rankings. After all, that's what they're for, right? For more than 2 decades, millions of people have treated FIFA rankings as a shortcut, a way to understand international football, a way to compare nations, a way to identify contenders before the World Cup even begins. But when we looked back at the last 25 years of World Cup history, something strange appeared. A pattern, a contradiction. A gap between what the rankings suggested and what actually happened on football's biggest stage. And the deeper we looked, the harder it became to ignore. Because some of the highest-ranked teams in the world repeatedly failed to win the tournament, while some champions arrived without ever holding the #1 spot. Which raises an uncomfortable question. What if FIFA rankings are football's biggest modern myth? Before we answer that, we need to understand why people trust rankings in the first place, because the idea feels logical. The best teams should rise to the top. The strongest nations should earn the most points, and the highest-ranked teams should have the best chance of winning the World Cup. That sounds reasonable. In most sports, it would probably be true, but the World Cup has never behaved like most competitions. The World Cup is not a league. It's not a season, it's not a marathon, it's a sprint. A short tournament where tiny moments create massive consequences, and that changes everything. Imagine 2 teams. One dominates qualification, wins friendly matches, collects ranking points for 4 years. The other spends the same period experimenting, rotating players, preparing specifically for tournament football. The first team may climb higher in the rankings, but that doesn't automatically make them more dangerous when the World Cup begins. That's the first problem. The rankings measure consistency. The World Cup rewards survival. Those are not always the same thing, and history provides some fascinating examples. Let's start with Germany. For decades, Germany built one of the strongest reputations in football. They weren't always the most exciting team. They weren't always the most talented team, but they consistently delivered when it mattered most. The World Cup seemed to follow different rules whenever Germany appeared, and that's important because reputation and rankings are not the same thing. One is built through points. The other is built through history. Football fans often confuse the two. The rankings tell us who has performed well recently. The World Cup asks a completely different question. Who can survive the pressure? Who can adapt? Who can handle 7 matches that determine everything? Those questions are much harder to measure. And that's where the myth begins. Because rankings create certainty. The World Cup destroys certainty. Every tournament starts with predictions. Every tournament ends with surprises. Yet somehow we continue to trust the rankings as if they possess special predictive powers. The numbers tell a different story. Consider the years leading into 2018. Belgium climbed to the top of the FIFA rankings. The famous Golden Generation, Kevin De Bruyne, Eden Hazard, Romelu Lukaku. For years they were described as one of the strongest teams in world football. The rankings agreed. They spent enormous stretches near the top. Many supporters believed a major international trophy was inevitable. And yet, when the World Cup story ended, there was no trophy, no final, no moment of immortality. A talented team? Absolutely. One of the greatest national teams of their era? Possibly. But the rankings had quietly created expectations that reality never fully supported. And Belgium wasn't alone. Because if rankings truly predicted World Cup success, we should see a simple pattern. #1 teams should regularly become champions. The closer you are to the top, the better your chances should be. Simple, predictable, logical. The problem? World Cup history refuses to cooperate. Take Brazil. At various points, they have been ranked first. At other points, they have not. Sometimes they entered tournaments as overwhelming favorites. Sometimes they didn't. Yet their success was never perfectly connected to their ranking position. The same is true for France. The same is true for Argentina. The same is true for Germany. Again and again, football's biggest tournaments seemed strangely resistant to ranking logic, which suggests something important. Maybe rankings are measuring the wrong thing. Not intentionally, not incorrectly, just differently. Think about how ranking systems work. They reward results accumulated over time. The World Cup isn't played over time. It's played in moments. A ranking system values consistency. A World Cup values timing. One great month can change football history forever. One bad afternoon can destroy 4 years of preparation. No ranking formula can fully capture that reality. And perhaps that's why some of the greatest World Cup stories arrive from places the rankings never expected. Think about Croatia in 2018. Think about Morocco in 2022. Think about countless underdogs who exceeded expectations. The rankings didn't completely ignore these teams, but they didn't fully understand them either, because tournament football creates different conditions, different pressures, different opportunities. The strongest team on paper is not always the strongest team in practice. That's a lesson football teaches repeatedly, and yet people continue to search for certainty. Maybe that's human nature. We like order. We like explanations. We like lists. A ranking provides all three. It transforms a complicated sport into something that appears measurable, something that appears predictable. But appearance and reality are rarely identical. Now here's where things become even more interesting. Because the myth isn't that FIFA rankings are useless. They're not. The rankings tell us many valuable things. They reveal long-term performance. They identify strong teams. They track consistency. They provide context. The myth is something far more subtle. The myth is believing they can predict the World Cup. That's where expectations become dangerous. Because once a nation reaches the top of the rankings, public perception changes. The media starts paying attention. Predictions become more aggressive. Pressure begins to grow. Suddenly, a team is no longer viewed as a contender. They're viewed as an expected champion, and football history suggests that's a very different thing. For 25 years, the World Cup has repeatedly punished certainty. The tournament loves chaos. It loves underdogs. It loves surprises. It loves proving experts wrong. Every generation believes it has finally discovered a reliable formula. Then, the World Cup arrives and destroys it. The rankings are simply the latest example, a modern attempt to make football understandable, a modern attempt to reduce uncertainty, a modern attempt to identify the future before it happens. But football has always resisted that idea, because football is not mathematics, it's not a simulation. It's not an equation waiting to be solved. It's a game played by humans. Humans make mistakes. Humans feel pressure. Humans lose confidence. Humans create miracles. And that's why the World Cup remains impossible to fully predict. Now let's ask the question differently. If FIFA rankings don't predict World Cup success as reliably as people think, then what does? That's where things become fascinating. Because when historians look back at great World Cup champions, they often discover traits that rankings struggle to measure. Tournament experience, mental resilience, adaptability, squad balance, defensive organization, the ability to survive difficult moments. Those qualities rarely appear in a table, but they appear constantly in championship teams. The rankings can tell us who has been good. The World Cup asks who can be great when everything is on the line. Those are not identical questions, and perhaps that's why so many football fans continue to misunderstand the tournament. We look for certainty where uncertainty dominates. We look for answers where only probabilities exist. We want the rankings to tell us who will win. The World Cup keeps reminding us that nobody really knows. Not the media, not the fans, not the experts, and certainly not a ranking system. Which brings us back to the myth. For years, people have treated FIFA rankings as a crystal ball, a way to see the future, a way to identify champions before a ball is kicked. World Cup history suggests something very different. The rankings are useful, valuable, interesting, but they are not destiny. They never were, and perhaps the greatest evidence comes from the champions themselves. Because when the trophy is finally lifted, nobody remembers ranking points. Nobody remembers formulas. Nobody remembers monthly updates. They remember moments, goals, saves, upsets, miracles. That's what defines football history, not where a team stood on a list 6 months earlier. Which is why the biggest World Cup myth of the last 25 years isn't that FIFA rankings are wrong. It's that people expect them to predict something they were never designed to predict, the future. And every 4 years, the World Cup delivers the same reminder. Football doesn't care what the rankings say. The only thing that matters is what happens when the tournament begins. Because somewhere right now, another team is climbing the rankings, another nation is being declared a future champion. Another group of fans is becoming convinced that the numbers have revealed the answer. Maybe they're right, maybe they're not. History suggests caution, because the World Cup has spent the last 25 years teaching the same lesson. The highest-ranked team is not always the best tournament team. The strongest contender is not always the future champion. And certainty is often football's most dangerous illusion. The rankings may tell us who looks strongest today, but the World Cup has always cared about something else: who can survive tomorrow. And those are very different things. The question is, how many people will forget that lesson before 2026? And which team is everyone trusting a little too much right now? Because if football history has taught us anything, it's that the World Cup loves proving certainty wrong, every single time. For more than 20 years, football fans have believed the same thing. The best team in the world wins the World Cup. It sounds obvious, it sounds logical, and that's exactly why so many people still believe it. If a team is ranked number 1, if they dominate qualification, if they have the biggest stars, if they enter the tournament as favorites, surely they should become champions, right? The problem is that World Cup history keeps telling a different story, again and again and again. Because when we look back at the last 25 years, something strange appears. The teams most people considered the best were often not the teams lifting the trophy. Sometimes they didn't even reach the final. Take France in 2002, the defending world champions, the defending European champions. A squad filled with stars. Many believed they were unstoppable. Then they failed to score a single goal and were eliminated in the group stage. 4 years later, Brazil arrived with another super team: Ronaldinho, Ronaldo, Kaká. A squad so talented that many people discussed the trophy before the tournament even began. But Brazil didn't win either. Again, the same lesson appeared. Being the best team on paper and being the best team in a World Cup are not always the same thing. Yet people kept believing. Because football fans love certainty. Every World Cup creates a favorite, a team that seems too talented to fail. Then the tournament begins, and reality starts asking difficult questions. Can they handle pressure? Can they adapt? Can they survive when things go wrong? Those questions matter more than most people realize, because World Cups are not won by the most talented team. They are won by the team that solves the most problems. Think about Spain in 2014. Think about Germany in 2018. Think about Belgium's golden generation. Think about Brazil in 2022. Different teams, different eras, the same pattern. Expectation collided with reality, and reality usually won. Now here's the fascinating part. If the best team doesn't always win the World Cup, who does? The answer is simple. Usually the team that performs best in the tournament itself. Not the team with the best reputation. Not the team with the best ranking. Not even the team with the best players. Tournament football follows different rules. One injury can change everything. One mistake can end a campaign. One penalty shootout can rewrite history. That's why great World Cup teams often possess qualities that statistics struggle to measure: resilience, composure, belief, the ability to survive. Argentina in 2022 showed exactly that. They lost their opening match. Most champions would have collapsed. Argentina didn't. They adapted. They survived. And eventually, they lifted the trophy. That's what makes the World Cup unique. Every generation searches for a formula, a shortcut, a way to predict the future. Maybe it's rankings, maybe it's star players, maybe it's squad value, but the World Cup keeps delivering the same reminder. Football refuses to become predictable, because football is played by human beings. Human beings make mistakes. Human beings lose confidence. And sometimes, human beings create miracles. No ranking can fully measure that. No prediction can guarantee it. Which is why the biggest World Cup myth of the last 25 years is surprisingly simple. The best team always wins. History says otherwise. And every 4 years, the World Cup finds a new way to prove it. The question is, which team is everyone too certain about right now? And will 2026 be any different?